Okay, hi everyone. We're moving on now to chapter 6 of Jekyll and Hyde, which is the remarkable incident of Dr. Lanyon. We need to talk through some of the basic structural elements, and then I want to go into some specifics about the timeline as well, because it can be a little bit confusing, but this will come up in some of the lessons over the next few weeks as well. It's important to note that the start of the remarkable incident is quite positive. Chapter 6 begins in a positive light. It describes that in the months after Sir Danvers Carew's murder, Dr. Jekyll appears to kind of renew himself and be a lot more happier in spirit. Some important quotations include the idea here that now that evil influence had been withdrawn, a new life began for Dr. Jekyll. So this idea of new life, of renewing friendships, he's even referred to as going to church more often, doing more charitable acts. All of these things are important to highlight that Jekyll seems to be, at least in this moment, winning the fight against Hyde, because after Sir Danvers Carew's murder, it's clear that Jekyll thinks that he needs to start taking control so that he doesn't let Hyde do anything as awful again. So it starts quite positively, but then pretty early on into the chapter, things take a little bit of a dip. It begins to become clear to Utterson that he can't see Jekyll, so he goes round to his home week after week, and Poole, who's the butler, he denies Utterson entrance to the home. So Utterson starts to lose a bit of faith here, and he doesn't really know why Jekyll won't let him in. So he goes to Dr. Lanyon's house to ask him about if he knows anything about Jekyll and if anything's happened. Kind of like what he did right at the beginning, so he turns to Lanyon for some guidance. When he goes to Lanyon, he finds him completely changed though. He goes to Lanyon and he finds a man who has his death warrant, and this is on page 23, halfway down, his death warrant written legibly upon his face. Basically, he finds a man who seems to be so clearly ill that he will die in the near future. So quite extreme. And then the description of Lanyon's physical appearance is also important. Same kind of section on 23. His flesh, the rosy man had grown pale, his flesh had fallen away, and he was visibly older and balder. So Dr. Lanyon seems to have had some sort of change, which we don't know what that was yet, but he went through a serious incident that's caused this deterioration to his physical appearance. And then a really, really good quote is a description of what might have happened to create this change. Some deep-seated terror of the mind. So it appears that Lanyon has changed, not necessarily because of some physical illness, something he's contracted like a virus or anything like that, but actually it's something to do with his mental state that has impacted his physical appearance. So that deep-seated terror of the mind is yet to be explained, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Underneath that, we have another really good quote directly from Lanyon, page 23. He says to Utterson, "I have had a shock from which I shall never recover." This shock, we don't know anything about it yet, but what you will find out, and it's important to just tell you this just now, is that in chapter 9, we have a first-person account from Dr. Lanyon. Chapter 9 is called Dr. Lanyon's narrative, and he specifically recounts this shock. So it's a bit of a weird timeline. Up until now, we've had everything go in sequential order. When you get to chapter 9, we actually hear the events which take place just before this incident in chapter 6. Now we'll talk about that when we get to chapter 9 as well, but it can be a little bit confusing. And the incident which he has had a shock from is Mr. Hyde comes to Lanyon's house and he transforms into Jekyll in front of Lanyon's eyes. So right now in chapter 6, Lanyon knows that Hyde is Jekyll, but he can't tell Utterson because he doesn't think Utterson would believe him. What he does do is he gives Utterson a sealed envelope and says, "Don't open this until my death." So quite confusing, but just so you know, at this moment in time, Lanyon has actually seen Hyde transform into Jekyll in front of his eyes, and that has given him such a shock, a deep-seated terror of the mind, that he actually will eventually die from this. And that happens just in this chapter. And the next page, 2 weeks later, Lanyon dies in his bed. Okay, and Utterson attends the funeral, and Jekyll writes to Utterson and explains that, he says, a good quote here, "I mean from henceforth to lead a life of extreme seclusion." So seclusion means kind of isolation, keeping yourself contained or alone. So Jekyll says to Utterson, "I probably won't be seeing you much again. I'm going to lead a life of seclusion." And he says also, "You must suffer me to go my own dark way." So there seems to be some recognition in Jekyll's writing here that actually, as best he's tried, he can't contain Hyde. And he's speaking in this mysterious tone, but he realises that his own dark way means that basically Hyde's going to soon take control over him. Now, we get a little bit of a description of the kind of weeks after this, but at the very end of the chapter, it's important to know what happens with Utterson in the letter. So Lanyon dies, and Utterson realises he needs to open the letter that Lanyon gave him. What he finds, though, is that in that letter, which was sealed, is another envelope that says, "Do not open until the death or disappearance of Dr. Jekyll." So we have a sealed envelope with another sealed envelope inside, and Utterson is again kind of perplexed by this. And he's also a bit concerned about the similarity in language between that envelope and the will from Jekyll, where it's, on the death or disappearance of. So it's obvious to us now that in that envelope will be an explanation of the whole thing, but we don't know that at this stage. In the very last quote on page 25, it's important. "The doctor," so this is about Jekyll, "it appeared, now more than ever, confined himself to the cabinet over the laboratory." Or the laboratory. So see, this idea of Jekyll confining himself to being close to the lab, this is important. We talked about the setting of the lab earlier, that this is a place that clearly Hyde is created. So if Jekyll is constantly keeping himself close there, you can tell that Jekyll and Hyde are starting to become much closer together as identities. So it's actually a very short chapter. Again, it's only about, in this book, it's only 3 pages long. There's so many little kind of twists and turns and detail that's important to go through it. We'll move on to chapter 8 next week, but that should help hopefully.